May 8th, 1945. Nazi Germany unconditionally surrenders. Conflict in Germany is over, or is it? The Big Three, Churchill, Truman, and Stalin, meet in Potsdam on July 15, 1945, to discuss how Germany will be rebuilt. They agree on a plan to divide both Germany and its capital, Berlin, into four sectors: one French, one British, one American, and another Soviet-controlled. World War II might have ended, but the battle between ideologies was just about to begin. Soviet-style communism versus capitalism and democracy. Many countries had fallen to the influence of the Soviet Union, becoming pieces of the Iron Curtain. Would Germany be next? Germany would act as a microcosm for the bigger picture of the clash between Western and Soviet ideals. Deep in the Soviet sector, Berlin would be the point of contention as many try to flee the Soviet regime from the eastern sectors. Economic plans were put in place for the rebuilding of Germany in each sector, but each ideology had different views of how Germany should be handled. The Soviet Union primarily sought reparations and got what they could from seizing machinery and dismantling factories. The economies of each sector were tied together by the same currency, and it seemed the Soviets were only slowing down the process of economic growth by taking East Germany's means of production. Amidst the seeking of reparations, the Soviet Union also instilled communist ideals in government officials in their sector, further drawing the discontent of the United States. In 1946, the United States and British zones merged into Bizonia. It was becoming apparent there would be a struggle between Western values and Eastern ideals. In order to free their economy from that of East Germany, West Germany, including West Berlin, announced their own new currency, separate from that of their Eastern counterparts, on June 18, 1948. The new Deutschmark was exchanged at a rate of 1 for every 10 Reichsmarks. This paid off their national debt, but destroyed the savings of countless Germans. Another consequence was that the now seemingly worthless Reichsmarks were flooding into the East, and it destroyed the already fragile Soviet economy overnight. Their response? Make a currency of their own, the Ostmark. This saved the fragments of the crippled economy and kindled a long hatred. Eager to counter the economic contest, on June 24, 1948, the Soviet Union began the Berlin blockade. Closing the highways and railways between Berlin and West Germany, the Soviet Union cut off Berlin from Western influence. Shortly after, knowing they had to act, the United States began the Berlin airlift to provide aid to those in West Berlin just one day later, on June 25th. Operation Vittles, as it was dubbed, supplied West Berliners with countless supplies. When the dust settled in September of 1949, the U.S. had airlifted approximately 2.3 million tons of supplies and cargo throughout the 324-day mission. In the spring of 1949, threatened by the shadow of the Soviet Union looming over Europe, the United States and 11 other nations signed the North Atlantic Treaty, establishing the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. This alliance emphasized that an attack on any member would be considered an attack on the whole, effectively creating a unified coalition against threats from the East. These nations' accord and mutual understanding was a sign of strength in the face of conflict. In the wake of NATO, in May of 1949, upon realizing that the blockade had neither prevented the creation of a Western German state or caused West Berliners to reject their allies in the West, the Soviet Union conceded the Berlin blockade, reopening the roads and railways into the city. The same month, 12 days after the end of the blockade, on May 24, 1949, the three Allied partitions of Germany officially coalesced when France joined Bizonia to form the Federal Republic of Germany. This act snuffed out the beliefs that Germany may unify once again and was soon answered by East Germany. In October of 1949, the Soviets reacted by announcing the German Democratic Republic. These declarations of independent republics truly solidified the division of Germany, and for the decades to come, East and West Germany would serve as a symbol of the ideological conflict taking place internationally as the Cold War escalated. The two sides' lack of compromise bred only the perpetuation of conflict. However, soon all eyes would be on Berlin. August 13th, 1961. Early in the morning, with most people sound asleep, shock workers quietly erect more than 30 miles of barbed wire, fencing, watchtowers, and mounted gun positions, sealing off West Berlin. The following day, Brandenburg Gate is closed. This wall would grow to have two layers ranging from 2 meters to 3.6 meters tall, and stretching for 156.4 kilometers. Over the next 3 decades, the Berlin Wall stood as a physical symbol of the division of rival ideologies and the refusal of the Soviet Union to make any accommodations in the clash between Western democracy and their own ideals. May 1st, 1960. A U-2 spy plane was shot down over Soviet airspace from which pilot Gary Powers was captured. He was held for almost 2 years until February 10th, 1962, when the U.S. and Soviet Union exchanged spies through Berlin's Checkpoint Charlie. This small compromise showed many people that there was the possibility to end the segregation, but as time would tell, not for another 20-some years. Exemplifying the struggles this conflict brought, on August 19, 1962, East Berliner Peter Fechter, only 18, attempted to scale the wall crossing into West Berlin, but he was fatally shot in the hip and left to bleed at the base of the wall. Crowds formed as each side just watched on. This demonstrated to citizens of both sides the incapacity to facilitate any form of cooperation in a time of such great conflict, illustrating the need for action to be taken. Peter Fechter's tragic death made him a figurehead representative of the 136 people who died trying to cross the Berlin Wall in an attempt to escape this conflict. June 26, 1963. President John F. Kennedy, in an act of solidarity and hope, declared, "I am a Berliner," in German, in front of thousands drawn to hear what the president had to say.
Today, in the world of freedom, the proudest boast is, "Ich bin ein Berliner."
This declaration articulated the willingness of the West to seek some forms of understanding amid the long-running ideological war. A solemn 8 years passed when finally some compromise was realized. In 1971, the four powers, Great Britain, France, Soviet Union, and United States, came to the quadripartite agreement on Berlin. The two conflicting ideologies ignored some of their differences to try and loosen travel along with the improvement of communications between both sides, renewing old, forgotten ties. As years go by, nothing changes. A city, a country, a world divided.
What is probably your most vibrant memory as a child growing up in a divided Berlin?
Most of the Berliners, I think at that time, if they had not close relations to the other side, they tend actually not to think too much about the wall. If you didn't live next to it, you didn't stumble every day against it. Unlike the older generation, who were really disrupted as family members by this wall. So for me, really, remembrance was like when we drove with cars through it, through checkpoints, wall itself, the building itself, but we didn't think much about it. It was like Rocky Mountains. It was there when you were born, it would be there when you died.
June 12, 1987. After forming a personal relationship with Gorbachev, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, visits Berlin and famously voices what thousands have been demanding for decades: the removal of the wall.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
This call for the destruction of the symbol of division further emphasized the West's commitment to an agreement being reached. 2 years later, in a show of strength and desire for change, on November 6, 1989, an estimated 1 million people attend a pro-democracy demonstration in East Berlin's main square, and protest the German Democratic Republic all over East Germany, all advocating for the same thing: compromise. 3 days later, on November 9th, the East German government announces a long-sought concession, allowing all visits from the east side to the west. Thousands upon thousands of East Berliners amass at the borders as the guards stand by, unable to process them all.
Tens of thousands of people streaming through the checkpoint without any border checks. West Berliners like me, we're coming to the gate, climbing on the wall, nobody's hindering us. We're getting over to the eastern side, coming back. The government gets completely out of control, to the people taking over. And this is the end of communist East Germany.
People begin tearing down the walls from both sides, celebrating this compromise after living through the blood and tears of oppression for 28 years. Later, the Brandenburg Gate is opened, and the next year, Germany formally united. Fellow countrymen hand in hand, rejoined and reconciled. The United States and Soviet Union set aside their differences and conflict in order to see the compromise of a once again unified Germany fulfilled.